The biggest limitation in your coaching is not your clients, it's your own self-awareness. I'm Ruth Kudzi. This is the Coaching Hub. Today, we're exploring how self-awareness is the core both for your clients and for you as a coach. Let's go. Self-awareness is a funny one. Only about 15% of us are truly self-aware, yet most of us think that we are. And it is the core to how we are being as coaches. Because how we are being, how we build relationships, how we hold space, what we notice, what is going on for us energetically in our nervous system, emotionally, what we're thinking, what we're seeing, all of those things influence the coaching relationship. So one of the first things about self-awareness is about having your own coach. Now, this doesn't mean that we always need to have a coach, but over time, I would expect nearly every coach to be working with a coach. Why? Because it helps you to see things that maybe you weren't aware of, because it helps to evoke awareness, because it helps to give you insight, because it helps to build new neural pathways, because it helps you to change your identity. If you really believe in coaching, if you believe in the process, if you expect others to invest in you as a coach, my question is, what would stop you having a coach? And this isn't about selling some kind of, pyramid scheme. It's about having somebody who is going to hold that space that you hold for others and give you that experience that you give others. So coaching is, in my mind, an essential for coaches. Now, there's equally, if you're doing a coach training program, the tools, the techniques, the work that you do that you would then do with clients in itself can build self-awareness and be transformational. It's why so many of our students say to us, actually, we completely changed because we were going through the process, because we were being coached, but also we were learning about ourselves. Because most of us don't spend our lives navel gazing, thinking, oh, I wonder what values we've got, or where are my strengths? We just don't do it because we're getting through the day to day. So that space to really understand yourself, to see patterns that maybe you're unaware of is absolutely essential as coaches for your growth. So first of all, it's about that baseline and then understanding where you need to change. I equally think as part of this, it's about emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, energy. So starting to understand more about our state. When are we more open? When are we more curious? When are we more compassionate? How are we lowering the volume on our internal distractions? How are we lowering the volume on our external distractions? So thinking about where we have coaching, how we set it up, our rituals and routines, thinking about and noticing what comes up for us. When do we feel nervous or anxious or frustrated or annoyed? All of those are really normal emotions, and they will come up in the coaching space. So what are we doing with them? So that's about the self-reflective piece, but it's also about supervision. Supervision is a space as a coach to take your stuff. So to say, I've noticed with this client, I seem to be getting a bit frustrated. I've noticed with this client, I find it harder to be present. I've noticed with this client or this type of problem, I find it harder to be curious. That space is sacred for a coach. Having a supervisor allows you to process and make sense of your coaching. So it's like that outside in lens. So having supervision every month, every couple of months, depending on your client load, really gives you that space to understand those patterns. Again, it's about having that different lens to you as a coach, and that can be fantastic for building awareness. Equally, mentor coaching. So mentor coaching is part of the ICF credential process. It's looking through the ICF competency lens at your coaching. It is not only useful to get a credential, it is useful because what happens in that process is people observe your coaching. And that is in itself gold. I have my coaching observed a couple of times a year. I'm a master certified coach. I also mentor master certified coaches. So for me to be in congruence, to have integrity, I need to be walking the talk. So having my coaching looked at, being able to understand my blind spots, what I'm not doing, what I'm doing too much of. So having a different lens on there, again, helps me build awareness. Now, I come from an education background, so I'm used to people observing me, looking at me, challenging me, and I think that is such an important space. We're often seen that challenge isn't good, but I think healthy challenge that is going to stretch us, challenge that is going to get us towards mastery is absolutely valid. So thinking about having a coach, mentor coaching, and supervision, I would say in terms of cadence, a coach between every 2 and 4 weeks, supervision, depending on how much you are coaching, between every month to 2 months, and mentor coaching, I would say, a few sessions at least every 6 months to a year. Okay, so we don't need to be having weekly sessions with all of these, but again, it can really help. The other thing I'm going to throw into the mix, and it may be that when you're having this, you might take a step back from coaching, is therapy. The reason being is that we are not therapists. And actually, having therapy can help us to really understand that difference. But equally, often we may be bringing some of our stuff into the coaching space, and that might mean connection isn't as deep. It might mean that we're not as present. It might mean that we are unconsciously making things about us. So therapy can really help us to understand ourselves better and to move through challenging times, difficult periods, and to mean that we are able to show up more for our clients. So I'm a big fan of therapy. I've had therapy on and off for 20 years. Gosh, more than 20 years. I've just realized how old I am. Nearly 30 years. So I've had therapy on and off for 30 years. So that has really helped me to make peace with who I am. And by making peace with who I am, by accepting myself, it means that I understand myself better. So when I am triggered or activated, I recognize that that is a sign of work to do rather than making myself feel bad. It means that I'm able to go into sessions more energetically clean. And because I do preparation, because I make sure that I'm not going straight back to back between coaching sessions, it means I can pick up on emotions. I can pick up on what is going on and recognize more what is mine and what is my client's. But I still get it wrong. So this is the other thing with self-awareness. It's about recognizing that we are never finished. And so I always say we've got a selfless model, which I think a loose model in Optimus. And at the start is our state and at the end is our self-reflection and awareness. And they go hand in hand. So yes, we get into the best state we can for coaching. Yes, we think about our nervous system, our emotions, what we're thinking, those distractions, but also we self-reflect. How was that today? How did we get on? What did we notice about ourselves in that relationship? That is all great things that we can take into our supervision space or maybe into our therapy space. But having that space is so key. And then it's about what are we doing with this awareness? So awareness is the first stage. But then if we're noticing, for example, that when clients are talking about a particular thing, we find it really difficult to be curious, we need to do the work there. So it isn't that self-awareness is the ending point, it's the starting point. And it's about being okay with where we are, not comparing ourselves, not making ourselves feel bad, recognizing that if we are to show up for others, we need to show up for ourselves. If we are to really hold space for others, we need to hold space for ourselves. And there's a saying that we can only go as deep as we have gone. And I would say, often when I'm talking to new coaches, we can feel this discomfort around emotions or going deeper. Recognize that. Welcome that. That's okay. So acknowledge where we feel that tension. Again, that's a sign of work that we can do outside of sessions. So there is so much around how we're being and mastering self that impacts how open, curious, compassionate, non-judgmental we're being with clients. So if we're not doing this work, we're not serving our clients. If we're not doing this work, we're not growing. If we're not doing this work, we're not mastering our coaching competence. So have a think, have a reflect. How am I building my awareness? How am I asking for feedback from my clients about the process? How am I taking that on? How am I allowing myself to hear things that aren't always easy to hear, but how am I acting on those? Because often we might ask for feedback and maybe someone says, actually, when you do this, I find it hard. And we get defensive. Okay, well, that's how I've always done it. Defensiveness, defense mechanisms are again a sign of work. It's a way of protecting our ego. What if we took feedback on face merit? What if we used it as fuel to develop rather than as fuel to make ourselves feel bad? What if we noticed in situations where we're projecting our own feelings, our own emotions, our own experience onto our client, and we were able to stop ourselves, we're able to recenter and reground so we can be more present with our clients? That is what real coaching is. That is what real presence is. So remember that you are always a work in progress. I am a work in progress. And this is about building and developing and having that self-awareness at the core for us, very much like for our clients, it is at the core of the work that they do. What has improved your coaching the most? Comment below. If you've enjoyed this, share it with a friend or a colleague, subscribe and follow, and come and visit our website, Optimus Coach Academy. We'd love to hear from you.